Welcome to another wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander, and today we're taking a look at Rifles in the Ardennes, and this is from Tiny Battle Publishing. Okay, now I'm going to butcher this name. It's from Gottardo Zencani, hopefully. This is a solitaire-only tactical wargame, and it comes in a magazine, like it's a folio game. You get this magazine of the rules, which are about, it's 10, 11 pages at the most. You can see an unbagging video that Grant did of all the different components. There's not a ton in the bag, but there's actually a lot that you can do with it. Some of these folio games, you get them and then there's just like so much in there, and I ask myself, why didn't you just put it in a box? Because this is a 17-hour game. Rifles in the Ardennes, however, is not like that. This is a very short, well, it's not very short, it's a short, relatively playable and very easy to learn solitaire tactical war game. You will command at most 8 to 10 units on a board, and I'll kind of show you what that looks like here in a bit. And with those units, you'll have literally a man with a rifle, you'll have a soldier, leader with an SMG, you might have a small LMG team, and like the biggest unit you'll have is like a tank. And if you've got a tank, you'll have like 2 other men, because they cost so much to put in your kind of army. But the gameplay itself is really neat. It's very simple. You basically have a board, a tactical board with 6 different regions in it. And your missions are, and there's a mission booklet with 8 different missions in it. Your missions are to progress through and return from, or get so far and rescue someone, or go and do a big attack halfway down the board. There's a lot of different things that you can do within the mission book. And the game comes with 3 factions. So you have the US, you have Germany, and you've got Russia. And we'll get there. So you can, with 8 scenarios, you've got 24 fairly unique situations that you can come out and play. And that's just the base. And I think this game is like $25 retail. So if you played this 24 times, you've gotten a lot of money's worth out of it. And it's a really fun, neat game. And you could feasibly play it that many times and not really get bored of it at all. You can play the missions together as a campaign and kind of track victory points and injuries and things like that over the course of what you do as well. So you get that aspect from it, which I know a lot of people are looking for in a solitaire experience. You kind of want something that gives you a bit more story and not just moving some counters around on a board. And this can do either. You can do it as a tactical exercise, which is really fun and neat. You can do it as a campaign and get some of that kind of lengthy storytelling as your leader and his troops go through a few different things as your team is asked to do a lot of different stuff. As far as components go, I have no problem with these. For a solitaire game, you get the big kind of 1-inch counters. I really like that. You don't have a lot of clutter on the board typically. Again, you'll have 8 counters of your own at most usually. And there'll be a few enemy counters, and there's 1 event counter and like maybe 1 terrain counter on each kind of box. But that's about it. You don't have a ton of bits and pieces and mess lying around. You throw some dice to determine how much you can do, and then there's some dice rolling that you do to determine what the enemy can do. But you could also very easily just prioritize what they're going to do based on what would be sensible for them to do. So there's some give and take there. You could house rule this game as much as you wanted to, or you can just play it as you kind of chuck the dice and the enemy does some very unpredictable things where, they, instead of picking off your one guy who's left alone, they might decide to do a head-on assault against some of your bigger groups and things like that to kind of keep you off balance. You'll have a unit roster, and it's one of those games where you'll write down all the different units you've got. Again, it's not a lot. It's not a ton of bookkeeping here. You just write down who they are, what they do, and then if they do or don't have a grenade because you paid for those. That's really all you're keeping track of. The unit roster, they have an enemy one. That's more of where I found that useful, because the enemy ones might have some extra bits and pieces on them, and it's just kind of keep a track of those as well, so it's not just generic bad guys on the board. So, speaking of bad guys, that brought me to this, and I know there was some comments on the unboxing video this game has Russians in it. And for a game that's called Rifles in the Ardennes, it's pretty weird that there'd be Russians in it. But there are. And having played this game, I'm going to straight up tell you there is absolutely nothing that is Ardennes related in this game. It was called Rifles in the Ardennes because it was small teams doing these kind of nighttime patrols and doing little missions. I presume that's where the inspiration came from. But the reality is the missions are generic in the sense that it's you go on a patrol to do a thing, or you need to go and find and destroy an enemy tank, a tank that's holding a critical sector. All of which could be applied to the Ardennes, but are also applicable to Eastern Front, to Northern. It's called Ardennes. That's kind of a red herring. This is just tactical World War II war game in a bag, is what you could call it, and that would also be accurate. Now, is it fun? Is it awesome? I think so. I had a great time playing this. It's very, very simple to learn. It's very quick to set up and play. You can play this. It would not take you long. This would almost be a kind of a lunch hour game as well. Kind of like Silent Victory. Those kind of games you can almost keep in your desk and just push your counters around and roll some dice, and that's kind of what you do. I had a blast playing this, and I'm going to show you the board, and then we'll kind of wrap up with kind of what everything looks like. So I'll kind of show you how to play it. So here's kind of a look at what a game might start out looking, and as you can see, not a lot to it. This is just the player aid, and we're going to use the United States because that's just what we're choosing to do. We choose a mission from this patrol book that has 8 different missions. And we just choose, the first one, nice and easy. Do mission 1, it's just a patrol. And this, we'll just keep this handy because it's got all the different charts and tables you'll roll on as you go. And then your other little bits and pieces are on the play aid card that tells you some combat values, some special abilities, and another chart if you need to roll on it. But again, super not complex. This is the kind of your unit roster. You'll want to photocopy this, and this is what you're going to keep track of. You'll write down the names and the designations of your units, the enemy units as well as they come up, so you don't get those muddled. And there's a turn track down here as well. There's a few different play aids here as well. Again, you just keep this out, not super duper complicated. Each mission, you start with like 10 points worth, and you'll be buying those. Each of these has an AP value, and that's how much it costs to buy those dudes. And so you just have 10 points to buy. With this, this kind of a recommended setup that we did here. The SMG and the rifle teams are all 1 point apiece. The LMG is worth 3 points. That's 9 altogether. And then we spent the last point. If you look on here, we bought some grenades, and it's 1 AP, and you get 6 grenades. And so, on this chart, you just assign your grenades in the equipment 1 box to all the different dudes who have grenades. Obviously, I didn't write it out on there, because I write mine on a separate piece of paper, which I don't have handy, obviously. But really, this is the setup. It's not a lot. There's not too much to do. A lot of the counters you won't use, because all of the other units, which I'll just put on here, all the blue ones are for the Germans, and the yellow ones, or the orange ones, are for the Russians, which is the Ardennes. So really, you'll use this much stuff. You don't use a lot more. Each of these stripes is what they're called. This is what we're going to work through. The goal of this mission, is a patrol, is simply to reach stripe number 1. So we're just going to progress up the board. When we get to here, mission's over. The patrol was a success. We did our patrol. Other missions have a lot of different things you need to do, going and rescuing people and getting back, things like that. But we're just on a simple kind of introductory one. What you'll do is you'll have these are event markers, and they have a question mark on one side. And when you flip them, they have a number, and that number corresponds. I want to flip those over there. Corresponds to this event table. If it's these numbers So 1 and 2, nothing happens. You know, number 6, this thing happens. Really, very simple. There's terrain, which we put out. Again, that came from this terrain table down here. Just before the game, we just rolled dice. For stripe number 1 and 2, on a 1 or a 2, it's open. On a 3 through 5, it's woods. And on a 6, it's fields. So that's what we did, just went down the line, put out the terrain. Really, really easy. To activate your units, you just roll dice. Get some d6s, and we're just going to roll these, and these are going to generate action points. So you roll them, and then you consult there's a table of what you get with that. And basically, if you roll this, I think it's if you roll a 6, you get yourself a bonus action point. On a 1 or a 2, you get nothing, so you just throw those away. And on a 5, you get 1 action point. And the difference between an action point and a bonus action point will become apparent as you play the game. So we actually rolled pretty, it's not badly, but also not great. We had a 5 and a 6, so we're going to get 1 action point and 1 bonus action point. Oops, before I drop all those my tiny dice. What you do is you'll divide, and you do this before, but you divide up your army into groups, and that's kind of how you're going to activate units together. And it's entirely up to you how you do it, but each team, so this guy, he's obviously my leader, and then this one is E, kind of on the unit roster. He's designated as an assistant leader. He acts as kind of as a leader as well. So I've got these 3 and these 3, so I've got a big rifle team. And then here we've got an LMG team. Leader's got an SMG. We've got 2 rifle units there as well. So I'm going to activate this team with my dice that was 5. That's 1 action point. You literally just move them on. Move them onto the stripe. And when you move onto the stripe, you flip your event to see what happens. Oh look, we had number 7. Consult the table. Number 7 is heavy rain. And it's -1 DRM to combat, except when attacking at range 0. Range 0 is within the same stripe. If I was attacking into this, I'd be -1 on my dice. And the range, most things can attack at range 1. Some things, like the LMGs, can attack at range 2. And then when you start getting into mortars and things, they can fire quite a ways across the map. You get into some really fun stuff. But because of the heavy rain, though, it's going to be -1 if we're attacking outside of the stripe that the firing team is in. Very simple. The woods here, we can attempt to go and take cover in the woods if we wanted to. That's going to give us a bonus DRM as well. So there's a few things that we can do, and that's what you're going to spend your bonus action points on. They can help you re-roll dice. They can help you do recon. They can perform a few different actions with that bonus. But really, we don't have many choices because we don't have any real action points left. So what we'll do is we'll kind of take a little look here and see what happens. So in this particular situation, the only thing we can do with our bonus action point, because we moved them on, when they move onto a stripe, we did that. We can spend a BAP to gain 1 RP, which is a recon point. So we're going to gain a recon point, and we just kind of remember that we have that. And a recon point, as you can see, once I actually put this back up, a recon point can be used to re-roll 1d6, or a +1 DRM on attack roll, or it can ignore terrain cover for vehicles. It can also do a -1 DRM on a patrol table, and we'll get there here in a second if we need to. So, what you kind of do now is you evaluate the situation and you go through what's called an enemy presence check. Because there is 1 or fewer enemies on the board, we're going to roll a dice on the enemy presence table, because we would hate for the game to be too easy. On a die roll, 1 through 5, nothing happens. That's okay. On a 6, random enemies might pop up. And again, this only happens when there's 1 or fewer enemies on the board, which would mean you'd just be kind of blowing through things. So it's just to help you actually have an interesting time. So we're going to roll the dice, roll a 3, nothing happens. Fantastic. If we had rolled a 6, it says roll on the patrol on the army sheet. This is my army sheet. We're going to roll on this patrol table down here, and whatever we roll, that's what comes out. Just they pop up on the board, and they're going to do some attacks here in a bit. Again, you can see this RP, the recon point. Remember, we converted our bonus action point to a recon point. We could spend that here for a -1 DRM. And you can see, a 6 is enemy rifle with grenade plus an SMG unit. If that goes down to a 5, they lose their grenade. Grenades are very potent. You don't want to get grenade attacks. So the -1 DRM is going to help you out fighting easier enemies, so to speak. So recon's going to be a good thing in that sense. But that's it. Nothing happened. That was great. Awesome. Basically, you just would then move on to the next turn. If there were enemies on the board, they would activate, and then there's a bunch of things that they would do. But really, we would just move on to the next turn. I roll the dice. We go again. Oh, awesome. I rolled 2 5s and a 1. So again, the 1 is wasted. We got 2 5s, we got 2 action points. So for my first action point, I'm going to move my group up here, and we'll flip this. And like we saw, a 1 on the event table is nothing. So nothing happens there. And then my second action point, I'm actually going to move these guys on. Feel like they need some backup there. Again, because they're moving on, we've already revealed this event, nothing else extra happens. So that's great. We've used up both of our action points. Because there's 1 or fewer units on the board, we check again on the enemy presence table, right here. Roll the dice, roll the 4, nothing happens. This is not very indicative of what normally happens in a game. So, great. Next turn, we roll those dice again. And I rolled, oh, that's hilarious, 1 action point and 1 bonus action point. So we'll move up and we'll see what happens here, because I think we might get into some fun stuff. And we have a bonus action point if we need it. Because I moved, I can convert my bonus action point into a recon point. So I have 1 recon point at this point of the game. So, we have event number 3. Let's convert the table. Roll on a 3 or a 4. We're going to roll on the patrol table on the army sheet. So let's do that. Now we're definitely going to get some enemies popping out. So we're going to roll a dice. And remember, I've got that recon point. So we're going to roll on here, and I'm going to spend my recon point for -1 DRM. So I roll the dice. I rolled a 1. Can't get less than a 1, so I wasted my point. But there's an enemy rifle on previous stripe. So we're going to pop out an enemy rifle unit. Oh, and an enemy rifle unit in this case, because the enemy is Germany. We'll pull out an enemy rifle unit, if I can find one. Obviously I can't find one. Enemy rifle unit. So now we get into the fun situation of being chased down by a rifle unit. Kind of walks into the middle of our patrol here, in between our 2 groups, and they're going to start doing some attacks. Basically they appear. I've used up all my actions because I only had the 1, so I can't attack them, I can't do anything else. So what we'll do is we'll consult in the enemy activation table. Will we do that? Actually, because there's 1 or fewer enemies present, I believe. Yep, we're actually, because there's only 1 or fewer, we're still doing enemy presence check. So let's roll a dice, roll the 4, that's okay. So no other extra enemies pop up. So we've just got this guy. The rifle unit, he's going to roll on his enemy activation table to decide what he's going to do. So he rolls a 6. So he's going to remove a cover counter from target group, if any, there aren't. If target group is at range 1, advance, then attack. Otherwise, cover, then attack target. So he's going to advance, and he's going to attack. Now, who is he going to advance and attack? That's the real question. So what we would do is we would consult in the rule book. There's basically a firing priority of what they do to determine which group unit will be attacked. So, because there's 2 different groups that are equidistant that it could choose to advance and attack, we're going to roll on the target table down here. So we're going to roll a dice. I rolled a 4. So on a 4 to 5, it's going to attack the larger group. Let's see. They're both the same size, so we won't. do that, let's see. We'll go with this group up here because they've got a larger force there. So, and then you would say which unit within the group is it going to attack? I rolled a 5. It's going to unit with the higher CF. If attack cannot cause damage, then select units with lower target number. And this is where we're going to consult this table here. So it's going to attack the unit with the largest combat factor. So the base combat factor of the SMG is a 3, and the LMG and the rifles are at 1. So he's going to attack the. He's going to shoot the leader. That's what he's going to try to do. And the leader, he's trying to roll a 6, is what he's trying to do. So it's actually quite difficult. And I don't even know if that's actually possible. And if it's not possible, let's see. He's rolling a d6, and he's adding his combat factor. And he is a German rifle. So his base combat factor is a 1. So it is possible to hit him. It's very unlikely. Because he has that -1 from the rain, so he's just going to roll a dice and shoot. Oh, and he did it. Because it's -1 from the rain, +1 from his combat factor. So he actually shoots the leader with the SMG, and he's going to suppress him. If anyone ever gets 2 suppression rolls, or 2 suppression markers, they are eliminated. You can attempt to remove suppression later on by spending action points to do recoveries and things like that. But really, it's very simple in that way. You kind of roll to decide who they attack, you roll a d6, add your little modifier, they suppress them. If they get further suppressed, they die. A suppressed unit has limitations on what it can and can't do, and it has negatives to its rolls. But really, that's it. This isn't an overly complex game. You just proceed through the game. Typically, you have a lot more enemies coming out. You'll have bands of enemies. They'll throw grenades at you. You'll have mortar attacks, artillery attacks. This is just kind of introductory, just to learn the system. It reminds me somewhat of Fields of Fire in the progressing through these generic terrains that you kind of put the modifiers in. But it's very, very, very simple. It's very much reduced. So that's kind of a look at the board. We'll wrap up with some final thoughts now. So that was a look at rifles in the Ardennes, and at least some of the mechanics there. They're not too much more. There's some chrome bits and pieces with tanks and armor and how the mortars fire and spotting and things like that we didn't quite get into, but it's absolutely not super duper complex. I did a video probably a year ago of introductory solo war games. This 100% makes that list, and I would actually very highly recommend this if you were new to wargaming and you were wanted to do some solo ones. This is a really, really fun game, and that's the most important part for a solo game. Yeah, there's not necessarily the most amount of history because it's quite generic, the scenarios, but it's really, really fun. I had a blast pushing the counters up and down, some surprise attacks, diving for cover, when the enemy starts throwing their grenades at you and it attacks everyone and you're all suddenly suppressed. And that might not seem like a terrible thing, but you're like, oh my gosh, that's 50% of my forces are now hiding for cover and any more attacks, and they might succumb to their injuries and die. Terrible. So you get a lot of tension because it's a really small map. And I alluded to the kind of Fields of Fire comparison. I would almost say this is Fields of Fire light. And Fields of Fire is a very, very complex game that gives you a lot of detail, and it's company level. This is tactical level, but it's almost that same type, like the idea behind the game where it's you kind of putting out these forces and you're moving your pieces around, trying to get to objectives and things. I got a similar type of feel out of that, and I had a blast with it. I really, really like this game. I think Tiny Battle Publishing, they've put out some really neat games, and this is definitely one of them. So, I mean, solitaire war game, super cheap price point, really easy to learn. And the payoff's there. I mean, you're not going to get 10 years out of this game unless you started writing your own scenarios, which you could very easily do. But for what you pay for, you get a really good amount, and I had a blast playing this. And I sat down with Grant, and we kind of played it together as well, and even he liked it. And if Grant likes a solo game, then I know it's good. This was fun. I'd highly recommend it. Rifles in the Ardennes from Tiny Battle Publishing. So I appreciate you watching. Go pick up this game if you want to. I had a blast playing it. If you like what you see, we've got a whole channel. Go and explore, like and subscribe if you feel like. And we've got a website, theplayersaid.com, where there's much more detailed kind of written reviews and explorations of the wargaming hobby. So thanks very much for watching. I've been Alexander.